Good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, June 16th, 2021, and this is the regular meeting. The Sandpoint City Council is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I am Councilwoman Deb Brule presiding. Also present are council members Joel Aspiro, Kate McAllister, and Andy Grote. Mayor Shelby Rongstead, Council President Shannon Sherman, and Councilman John Darling are absent this evening. We will now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone will please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any announcements from council this evening? Are there any announcements from staff?
Yes, Councilwoman Rule. I have a couple of updates more than announcements. First update on War Memorial Field and that project. We will be having the ramps installed that lead to the docks. That will be accomplished before the end of this week. So anyone that's been using it up to this time that notices there's a rocky area going up to the docks, it's because the ramps hadn't been installed to those yet. So those will be before the end of the week. The restroom is down at the site and we are just waiting for plumbing to be completed for that. So it is fully operational. There has been some discussion in the community about ADA access and where there is ADA access. And as council will recall, we have the sidewalk along the south side of the ramp that is not ADA accessible. It was to get some pedestrians walk down. It was to get them off of walking down the middle of the boat ramp over to the side. But this project did add an ADA accessible pathway, and where the public can access that is right near where the new restroom is. And the pathway kind of winds around, meets all of the ADA accessibility requirements, and ultimately leads down to what will be installed at ADA non-motorized launch down there. That will be installed next month, and ADA access to the boat, to the docks, will be on the north side where the ramp goes down there as well. And I would also note the nice thing, if you haven't been down there on that new walkway that was completed, it also connects with Lakeview Park. So even if you're coming from the other side walking through Lakeview Park, you could access that ADA accessible walkway and get down to the water down there. So that's where we are with the War Memorial Project. That's just getting completed. One of the challenges we've had in the area is car parking in our boat trailer parking spots. So we are heavily monitoring that. So that's the warning. We are ticketing, and that's been an issue, a challenge for us in the past. We've added even more boat and trailer spots, but even more significantly, there were more regular car park spots that were added into that parking lot. So they're on both sides of the parking lot, but we are monitoring police regularly and our crews for the boat trailer parking, and we are ticketing if it is not boat trailers in there. Finally, you may have noticed, have been striping of our streets, restriping of the crosswalks, and our center lines and our bike lanes has been occurring. The center lines and bike lane striping was finished up today, and that included redoing the bike lanes along Boyer. So the lanes on there, many people think that those are actually parking lanes. They're actually bike lanes there. So, and you may notice some differences in the width. So those were brought into compliance with standards for bike lane widths and as travel lane widths along Boyer. So that was completed today. We have another project that is completing actually tonight, overnight, and that is finishing our CIPP. So those are lining our sewer pipes for inflow and infiltration. And so there is work occurring downtown on Main and 2nd tonight, and all of the adjacent businesses have been notified and are aware of that. So we'll be starting at 7 o'clock, and then occurring overnight tonight. And then finally, we have a road closure tomorrow on Great Northern. And this is for the start of our water main replacement there at Gooby. So there are road closures on Great Northern tomorrow. So we'll be getting notices out in our Facebook page and out hopefully through media channels tonight on that as well. That's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will now proceed with the public forum portion of the meeting. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public present who would like to address the mayor or council regarding items listed on the consent calendar or any topic not listed on the agenda?
Madam Councilwoman, I am not aware of anyone who wishes to speak during public forum this evening. No one has signed up.
Okay, then that concludes the public forum portion of the meeting. Okay, we move on to the consent calendar. For the record, the total amount of bills is $899,358.12, reflecting $287,636.48 for regular payables and $611,721.64 for payroll. Are there any items council wishes to remove from the consent calendar? Okay. I guess we need to move on to entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
Okay, this will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Grote,
Yes.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule,
Yes,
Councilman Espero.
Yes.
and the motion passes. Under old business is an update from Infrastructure and Development Services Director Amanda on the status of the wastewater treatment plant project. Good evening.
Let me know when you're ready, Amanda.
All right. Thank you and good evening, council members. Tonight's presentation is an update on the wastewater treatment plant facility. It's been approximately a year since we last updated council and the public on this project. That is not a reflection of our progress on this effort. We have in fact been progressing, and I would like to provide you with an update on what's been accomplished over the last year, as well as what are our next steps and kind of where we're going with this effort. So this presentation, as a note, will be on our website by tomorrow. So if you'd like to go back and take a look at it or share it with others, it will be available under the news section on our main page. As council will recall, as well as I'm sure members in the public, we really kicked this project off in full swing in 2017. That effort was initiated not only from a compliance perspective, but a recognition by the city that our infrastructure at the wastewater treatment plant is aging and it's at the end of its useful life, and action needed to be taken. So we had a twofold approach. Number one, we needed to address our permit compliance as well as the infrastructure in and of itself. So over the last 60 years, I would say we have done a lot of improvements, and I think that that's worth noting. We have done most recently in 2008 some significant improvements on the facility, but we've been kicking the can a bit on doing a full replacement, not only for financial reasons, but it's a significant undertaking. So at this point, we've gotten the most out of the facility as possible. And our last action by council was the adoption of the facility plan that details how are we going to move this project forward. That was adopted in August of 2018, as some of you may recall. Since that time, we have had progress at the wastewater plant itself. We had the 2008 repairs, as I just mentioned, as well as interim plant upgrades. So if you'll recall from the facility plan, we referred to those as the bridge improvements. The intent with that word is that we are bridging the gap to the point at which we have a new facility. So those bridge improvements have nearly been completed. One of the most significant bridge improvements that we did in 2019 was adding chemical feed that provides compliance, and beyond compliance, actually, it's really enhancing our ability to comply with our phosphorus removal criteria. We already meet phosphorus requirements of our permit, but this chemical feed allowed us to enhance that. In addition, we have replaced various equipment such as the boiler and pumps, as well as this year we are working towards getting a preliminary design done on a new screen. It's called the headwork screen, which is basically where everything comes into the plant to ensure that we have a backup in the event of failure. So how did we select those projects that were going to occur before we replaced the plant? It was really a risk assessment. What is most likely to fail and what is the consequence of that failure while we go about replacing this plant? And so that's been our primary focus to date. In addition, we have been continuing, as you've heard over the last several months, to aggressively tackle inflow and infiltration. Why does that matter when we're talking about our wastewater treatment plant? It matters significantly because the more that we can reduce the flows going to the plant, the smaller plant we can build, the less costs, and it's a win-win all around. So that effort continues, and it will continue for the next many, many years to come. Addressing inflow and infiltration is really never done. We're just taking a more aggressive approach at this point, and we'll continue to address it in time. We're also continuing to pay down debt. We have an existing bond that will be paid off by September 15th of 2022. So it's really important. We heard from council when we went to adopt the facility plan that we needed that bond paid off before we stack debt on debt. So that payment has been occurring. We've also been actively engaging representatives and agencies, both at the federal and state levels, to look for funding opportunities. We continue to have those conversations, and we continue to monitor for those various funding opportunities that continue to come down the pipeline. We have most recently, which I'm really excited about, we've engaged a program manager and technical advisors to assist us through this process. I'm going to talk a little bit more later about what that actually means and how it fits into the puzzle. We've also been drafting procurement documents and working very closely with our legal counsel, as well as Cheryl, our procurements and contracts officer, to figure out how we're going to approach this project. And then tonight really kicks off our public and industry engagement effort. We have been getting calls for probably the last 5 years here at City Hall about people interested in constructing this new plant for us. It's ramped up a lot since then, and so we're really excited to have enough information to now be sharing it with the industry about how we're going to tackle this. There's a lot of interest in moving forward with this project. So some common questions that you may be hearing that we tend to get a lot is, how much will this project cost? That is a great question. The facility plan budgeted $50 to $70 million for that project. It's a big range, it's a big price tag. And the fact is until we get further into the weeds of the design and the means and methods of construction, we won't be in a position to refine those costs. But currently that is our target number, and that's kind of what we're using when we're talking to agencies about funding opportunities, as well as when we're structuring how we're approaching this project. So how are we going to pay for it? As I mentioned, we are aggressively looking for grants as well as loan options. I think it's going to end up being a combination of the two. And then, as we've discussed in the past, as you'll recall, we need a comprehensive study to look at these costs as well as our O&M costs and how and if this effort is going to impact rates or not. It's premature to answer that question at this point, but being able to move this project forward leads us to being able to answer that question. So when will the project be complete? The preliminary schedule provides that the new facility will be complete in 2027. That is our fiscal year 2026. And I have a more detailed schedule in the presentation here. So is the project shovel ready? That's a term we hear a lot. And the answer is yes, it's shovel ready in the aspect that we have a facility plan that goes into the factor of making it shovel ready, as well as a permit that tells us this is how you have to comply, as well as what's called design build. It's how we're approaching the project delivery. So we're going to talk just a little bit about that this evening, and I'm happy to answer any further questions that you have. The subject of design build, as staff will certainly attest to, we could spend hours talking about it. It's kind of, I think, a fun subject, but I promise we won't spend hours. In a nutshell, when we talk about design, build, project delivery, a lot of words, what it really means and boils down to is one contract. So as we continue to look at ways for us to construct this new plant, it's a pretty complicated effort from a logistics perspective, especially because we have an existing plant in place that we're putting a new plant and replacing it. It still needs to function as we're doing that, right? And so the idea of how we're going to deliver this project is critical to the conversation of risk, money, and time. And so the answer to that is design, build, project delivery. So one contract, what I mean by that is we'll have, as the city, we'll have one contract with what's called a design builder, and they are responsible for the project complete. So all the engineering, they're assisting us in selecting technologies, they're working with the state agency to get approvals in that process, and then they're also responsible for constructing it. So it's kind of a one-stop shop in that regard. That is very different than how we typically do our construction projects. As you all have seen, we typically run through with the design, we come up with an estimated cost, then we solicit for bids, we have to take the lowest bid, and then we come forward with you asking for an approval. This is completely overlapped. What I just described to you there is really the city has a contract with an engineering firm, and then we have a contract with a builder. So there's this gap. There's two different lines in that structure. What we're talking about is a single line. It's one point of contact, a single primary point of contact for everything. There's a lot of rules that go with procurement like that for a variety of reasons. And the idea of design build is not new. It's been happening all over the nation and actually all over the world for many, many years. But why did the city select design build for this project? On the presentation, you'll see 5 key points. There's really several reasons to go with design build, but for this project, these are the primary reasons. Number 1, design build, meaning one single contract, fosters and capitalizes on innovation. So if we were to pick a single engineering firm, we're going to get that engineering firm's ideas. In this method, and the way that we actually go about procuring it, we're getting ideas of how to actually construct and what our technologies are from a pool of engineering firms. So we're really forcing through competition them to come up with the best solution. It's pretty exciting when you see it in its works. The second reason is there's a contractual obligation, and I won't bore you with the details of it, but there's a contractual obligation for the owner and the design builder to truly work together as a team. There is a vested interest, not just financially, but reputation-wise, for them to provide and for us to provide a project-first attitude. What I mean by that and mindset is less of the finger pointing, right? It was their fault, my fault. No one ever says it's my fault, right? But that finger pointing typically happens in that traditional method where we have a designer on one contract and a builder on another. There's a lot of three-way finger pointing. So in this case, there's really not a lot of room to point the fingers. We're all in it together, and that's just not a fuzzy word. It's built into the contract to make sure that happens, that they're genuinely looking out for our best interest because our best interest is their best interest. The other reason is schedule and cost benefits. Well, how does design build differ from any other? It really comes down to the fact that a contractor's in the process early on. They're looking at how are we going to build this so that we don't end up with a design solution that a contractor later comes back and says, we can't build that, or here's all the things that you missed when you thought of this idea. So it's pretty slick in that regard. So the schedule and the cost benefits come from fundamentally from design input, as well as logistics and how are we going to phase this project, right? Because we still have to be able to treat wastewater. Number 4, we're assigning risk to the party that's best able to manage it. Instead of us taking on all of the risk or us shoving all of the risk onto somebody else, or somebody only looking out for their risk, we figure that all out in advance. And then number 5 is it's the data supports that this method for this type of project is proven to be a better way to do business. There's less claims, there's less overages and cost control, and there's less delays. I'm going to pause there for a second. Any questions before I jump into schedule and next steps? I know there's a lot. Okay. So timeline, can you see that okay, or do I need to blow it up some? Fine. Fine?
Good.
Our fancy screens. Okay. So the timeline to replace the existing wastewater treatment plant has multiple factors in it. I won't go over every single line in this, but essentially what you're looking at here is the first line is inflow and infiltration. We just talked about that. That started many, many years ago, and it will continue for many, many years ahead. And so that's the full length of this timeline. The timeline starts now, even though we've been working on it in the past as well. And then it shows us wrapping up when the project's completed in 2027 or fiscal year 2026. In addition, we intend to be wrapping up our interim facility improvements, bridging that gap by the end of this year, so into the winter of next fiscal year. We, as part of the facility plan upgrades, one really critical component is the fact that our permit expires in November. Our current permit expires in November of 2022. That seems far away, but we actually start that process this month. So this month we have to engage with the Department of Environmental Quality to start renewing that process or that permit. Why does that matter? Because that is our ultimate performance goal, if you will, with how we're building this and designing this plant. So that's going to give us the parameters of these are all the things that you need to meet and think about when you're designing the facility. So the timing works really well in that regard. So that's the top yellow line that you see. So we need to have a new permit in hand by the end of November 2022. Our technical advisors that are assisting us with the design build delivery will be working hand in hand to assist us with that permit renewal as well, so that our procurement documents think that through as well. And then we also, as I mentioned, will be doing a rate study. We will be doing capacity assessments. How much do we really need to treat? That's such a critical factor in this, as well as jurisdictional partnering. What do I mean by jurisdictional partnering? We previously, when we were doing the facility planning efforts, we previously have engaged sort of our sister cities, if you will, or our neighboring communities and jurisdictions on their interest to look at collaborating on our wastewater treatment facility. At that time, there wasn't a lot of interest. Since then, we've obviously seen a lot of growth, and I think things have evolved, including different permit conditions for the other jurisdictions, and their ability to treat their own wastewater has proven to result in more conversations as of recently. Those conversations, particularly with Kootenai-Ponderay Sewer District, are continuing to progress. We are looking for opportunities. Nothing has obviously been agreed upon, but the idea of them potentially considering actually utilizing our facility when we don't have those really high inflow and infiltration flows coming into our plant might provide an opportunity for them. So we are going to continue those conversations and look for those opportunities to partner with those located in our urban area. That I anticipate will continue throughout next year as well. Project funding, I already mentioned to you that we're going to continue down that path with trying to get additional funds to meet that $50 to $70 million target. We already currently have funding to get us through this first phase, meaning the procurement, the assessments that we've talked about, and some of those improvements, with the intent of, again, not stacking debt on top of debt. So that's why you see the two different green lines there. We do not intend to fully design the facility or start construction until our current debt is paid off. That's how this funding strategy has been detailed. And then last but not least, the design build project delivery is in of itself a multiple step process. And that is what you'll see here in the schedule in the orangish colors. I won't go into every single line item, but what's really important for I think council and the public to realize is that this is a phased process. And the first phase is really reaching out to the industry, getting their qualifications, shortlisting it down to 3 firms, and then those 3 firms providing us with really detailed and robust proposals of how they would approach this project. And we're going to have more conversations in the months to come about what that really looks like and means, because it functions very differently than the traditional way we've done things in the past. And so we anticipate having phase 1 of this design build process, which includes validation, the preliminary engineering report. That's the first step. What we decide from a technology perspective has to be approved by the regulatory agencies. And then get that completed and authorization Right around the same time, we intend to get funding and pay off that debt, and then move right into the completion of the design as well as construction. Any questions on schedule? Okay. So next steps in the near term, kind of taking that bigger schedule and honing in on what are we working on and what are you going to be seeing and hearing from us. First and foremost, we're going to be publishing a request for letters of interest. That's where we ask the industry to submit us basically 1 to 2 pages and say, tell us what you think about this project. What is the industry should we know as we go about soliciting? So we're looking for that feedback. Once we get that information, we host solicitation meetings. So we basically have this type of conversation with a broader industry, hear their questions, answer them, and then we follow that directly up with a request for qualifications. That is less specific to our project and more specific to tell us about you, firm, right? These firms tell us what are their experiences, what are their qualifications, who do they have on their team? And then from there, like I mentioned before, we will shortlist it and ask for proposals. Only those top 3 respond to the proposals. And so that's really the effort that we are full court press to get done in a timely manner so that we can meet the rest of the deadlines on the schedule. In order to facilitate that, not only from a staffing perspective, but also from a technical perspective, we have engaged a team of consultants that will assist us not only from the advising on the procurement itself that specialize in this, how do we approach design build, as well as technical advisors that will ensure that what we're asking the industry to give us in return and to propose on is technically in alignment with the direction that we need to see our facility get to. And so we're really excited about the program manager and the consulting team from a technical side. The name of that firm is WPE. They have and this website will be updated by the end of the week with some bios about those individuals. And they have an extensive amount of experience in program management specifically, as well as a wastewater treatment facility projects specific to design build. So with that, I will open it up for any questions. Anything I missed?
Great.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Amanda.
Anyone who has signed up to comment on this item? And I'm not seeing anyone on Zoom who is indicating that they wish to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to the next item, which is the Fire Services JPA proposed resolutions adopting the new joint powers agreement for coordinated and cooperative provision of fire services in the city of Sandpoint, Sago Fire District, and West Side Fire District, and the 2021 through 2024 collective bargaining agreement between the city of Sandpoint, West Side Fire District, Sago Fire District, and the International Association of Firefighters Local 2319. City Administrator Jennifer Stapleton will provide a presentation.
I'm ready, Melissa.
All right.
I'll just pull up my summary here. Thank you, Councilwoman Rule. This has been a long time coming and much discussion over several months. And I would like to thank our partners in this endeavor, Sago Fire District, West Side Fire District, and our firefighters that work through for all 3 agencies that we went through collective bargaining discussions with, and I think came to a good collaborative path forward to enhance our shared services under a JPA. I do want to highlight for the council's benefit as well as the public some of the key changes from our previous joint powers agreement. So we've been in a joint powers agreement initially with Sago Fire District, and then we added West Side Fire District a couple of years later, and have been operating that way for the last several years. Our joint powers agreement actually expired late last year, and we had Fitch Consultants come in last year, as council will recall, and take another look at our system and look for ways that we could improve it. Next steps, when do we when would it make sense to consider allowing other agencies in, or does it make any sense to continue to stay in this structure? Based on the report that was presented by Fitch and Associates, the recommendation was that there are benefits to citizens living within all three jurisdictions with a shared fire services model. When appropriately administered and costs really shared appropriately, there are cost savings to be gained with that because we share administration across all three agencies. And you will recall that in that report, it recommended a different cost allocation basis. And then Sarah, our finance director or treasurer, recommended some changes to that. And we had discussed that with council as well as with the two district boards that we felt was a better way to share costs, apportion costs across the three agencies. This new joint powers agreement that's before you for consideration is a 3-year term. We have been on an initial agreement that renewed on 1-year terms. And one of the key recommendations from our consulting group was that we move to a 3-year term that was, number one, consistent with our collective bargaining agreement. So we had a path forward and a clear system for collective bargaining for the firefighters and a longer term plan, not revisiting it every single year. In fact, it seemed as soon as we got moved through a year and kind of had everything all sorted out, now we were to the point that we needed to renew the JPA. So administratively, this will be easier for us as well. It also includes options for 3-year renewals as well. There was a restructuring of the JPA board under our past agreement. There were 2 representatives from each of the agencies and a community at large member who had been serving as the chair of the JPA board. And the JPA board functioned more as a policy board, and it was a bit unclear relative to roles and decision-making between the JPA board and then what is a council and district commissioner board decision-making. So again, the recommendation from Fitch and Associates was some restructuring of the JPA board to be a smaller board with a single representative from each of the agencies and an executive director that was convening that board and ensuring that we had the continuity. The recommendation was that the executive director for the board be the city administrator. That's what's been included in this JPA agreement. But we also provided for each agency to have an alternate for the board. So in case a member couldn't attend, there's the opportunity for all 3 agencies to be represented at the meetings. The role of the JPA board is really to oversee operations. So our organization structure changes under this, with the fire chief reporting to the JPA board in conjunction to myself as the executive director of the JPA board, rather than reporting to 3 different boards. So in our past structure, Fitch and Associates presented on this, we kind of had a fire chief that had all of these different masters. There's a JPA board, there's 2 district boards, and then under our traditional structure, our department heads report to my position and the mayor. So we had a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so this really consolidates it better and has that reporting structure to a JPA board that meets monthly, with myself coordinating with the fire chief to schedule meetings, put together the agenda, but even more broadly working with our staff. So another key change in this JPA is that all of the firefighters within the system, with the exception of any that are specifically grant funded at a single agency, or SEGL also uses temp seasonal firefighters specifically for wildland fires, all of the regular full-time personnel will move over and become employees of the city of Sandpoint effective later this month. And so they will be subject to rules and regulations of Selkirk Fire, but now we're under one employment policy and procedure. We have HR support for that. We have all of the support that a broader agency brings to bear. And all of those administration costs would be shared across the 3 agencies in accordance with our cost allocation structure. The JPA board will also be responsible for reviewing performance reports, which is in alignment with what we do here at the city, where we have an adopted ordinance about performance reporting, and you'll be getting a performance report or annual performance report in conjunction with the budget presentation next month. But we've also put in the requirement that JPA board will establish performance benchmarks for the fire system operations, and we'll be getting better oversight across all 3 agencies relative to what's happening in the system with monthly financial reports that are part of the shared administration. And again, having all of the employees at a single agency makes it easier for seeing, you know, who's moving, how are we moving across stations, who is somebody really working for, who really should bear costs for overtime or callbacks or things like that. So it will provide for better management of the system. So that's the summary. One thing I would note for you, I know some of you get in and read your packets early going into the weekend. There was an email that came out from Melissa, our clerk, yesterday. The boards unanimously approved the revised JPA last night. There were a few changes that were made in the agreement. There was some clerical cleanup typos that were in there, some commas that were added and things like that as more reviewers looked at that they caught. The other thing that the change that we made was clearly identifying what is the process for appointment and termination of the fire chief. And let me just scroll down here and get to that section so I can point it out to you specifically. I remember what page I'm on. That's our cost allocation there again, that is in the system. I would note again too that we also tightened up our section on joint purchasing, that again, under kind of one agency system, joint purchases that are agreed to will be made by the city, shared across the agencies and in accordance with the city's purchasing policy and procedures. So our purchasing policies differed across the 3 agencies, which also creates challenges for continuity of administration and expectation. So here it is under 7.3, the fire chief. So the fire chief will remain a City of Sandpoint City Council appointed position as provided in Title I, Chapter 6 of Sandpoint City Code. Hiring and termination recommendations for our fire chief specifically shall be made by the JPA board and city administrator. In the event that there is a recommendation of termination, removal would require confirmation by affirmative vote of 1/2 plus 1 of the members of the full city council. And in the case where there isn't a recommendation, but the council wants to take up an issue of termination, there was something so egregious, council felt that council wanted to take action and wanted to do it upon council's own initiative, then it requires a unanimous vote of council. The difference with this and for all of our other appointed positions across the city is that typically within just our own structure, our appointed positions, the recommendation for appointment, hiring and termination is made by the mayor, as opposed to, in this case, it's the JPA board and working with the city administrator position. So the mayor really isn't involved in day-to-day operations and oversight of fire. It falls under really the legislative bodies. And again, for the day-to-day and operations, that's under the JPA board, working with myself and supported by administrative staff. I can answer any questions, Councilwoman Rowe.
Does council have any questions? No. It was a long road.
Yes, it was.
Thank you for all the hard work and effort. I know there were many people working on this for a long time. Madam Clerk, has anyone signed up to comment on this issue agenda item?
Madam Councilwoman, no one has signed up to speak on this matter, and I do not see anyone participating remotely who wishes to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. I will entertain a motion to approve the resolution adopting the joint powers agreement for the coordinated and cooperative provision of fire services in the city of Sandpoint, Sagal Fire District, and West Side Fire District.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Espero,
Yes.
Councilman Groot,
Yes.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule.
No. Okay, the motion passes. Not used to having to say that, sorry, a little slow. I will now entertain a motion to approve adopting the 2021-24 collective bargaining agreement between the City of Sandpoint, West Side Fire District, and Sagal Fire District, and the International Association of Firefighters Local 2319. Although before I do that, did we have any presentation on that piece, or you didn't specifically speak to that?
Didn't specifically speak to that. I've got up on your monitors and for the public's benefit, significant items with actual or potential financial impact. I would note for council relative to the CBA agreement, we were intending the structure and the path forward with the JPA. So that was considered in negotiating the CBA. We had participation in negotiations with all three entities again. Councilwoman McAllister represented the council for the city, and we also had a commissioner representing West Side and Sagal Fire Districts. And again, thank the firefighters and the union members for productive discussions in those negotiations. And personally, I'd like to recognize Nicole, our HR director, who kind of led us through this process. It was a bit complicated working through processes of moving employers, what that meant for benefits and alignment. And she kept us organized and clear, and went back and forth and worked closely with the union president, even outside of negotiations, in order to make this happen. So I think this brings resolution and a path forward for all of the firefighters as well. The CBA agreements have been unanimously approved by both districts. So it will be all three agencies signing on the CBA. All employees are subject to the CBAs agreed by the three agencies.
Okay, thank you. Does council have any questions?
No, just a really good job, everyone.
Okay, I actually did have a couple questions, and they were just clarifying. There's still mention of battalion chief, and I thought that that was a position that we were no longer going to have from our old discussions.
You saw that in the CBA?
Yeah, there are some different charts, and unless.
Yes, I am going to Councilwoman Rule. So here's our new structure. We're going to try this one out tonight. So
Okay, because I
we
thought there was.
frequently have it come up where there's questions and I may not be the best staff person to answer. So staff that are in the back of the room, we can swap out the cameras, and they are mic'd up now, so we don't have to wait for them to come up. So I'll kick it over to Nicole.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Councilwoman Roll. Yes, we did opt to leave that in the CBA. In the event that there are any future changes in the JPA structure, then we would not have to go back to the negotiations table with the union.
Okay, but we did originally have those other discussions where it wasn't necessarily going to be a position because we were going to assistant chief or something like that. Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that, because when I went back and read it, I was like, this is not what I remember. And then there's a part where it discusses the PTO time, and it says who is the chief officer. So who is going to be the chief officer within that PTO time when they're requesting and doing different things? Is that the chief, or how does, that wasn't clear to me.
It will be either the fire chief himself, him or herself, the deputy fire chief, or in some cases, it could be the shift staffing officer, a captain.
Okay, okay. And then under the item D, which has to deal with overtime, that did not read very clear to me. I can't remember. I didn't write down the page number on that one, and it was a little bit confusing to me. I don't know if you can pull that up.
I can try to. Nicole, do you know which section that's under?
Might be in my bullet points, because, yeah, the verbiage is a little,
It's the paid, it's
Page.
going to be
Oh.
near the paid time off section. It was pretty far through the document when I was reading.
I believe is it about the 72-hour cap? Approval by the fire chief unless it's extenuating circumstances.
No, it was about trading shift stuff, I think. It was the shift trading piece. And it's item D is all I wrote in my
Okay,
notes. Sorry, I didn't
okay.
write down.
It's page 13 of the CBA.
I will get us there.
So,
Item D,
oh, I think you just went past it. Or no, you're not on page 13 yet.
I was in 13 in the document, or in the whole file, but not the document. Here we go.
Yeah, right there, D.
Okay.
So that was confusing into who so shift trade approvals shall not result in overtime for either employee involved in the trade. If the employee working a shift, no, that's not the one, it's due, will not for 3 hours employees. Yeah, the timesheet thing, like where the overtime is, the scheduled duty employee who does not work due to a shift trade shall still record those hours on the employee's timesheet. If they're not working the shift, I get really confused by that. Those hours are counted towards an overtime calculation. The employee who works the shift trade does not record those hours on the employee's timesheet and is not entitled to any overtime for those hours worked. So I'm totally confused by that. Can you explain to me what that actually means? Or if there needs to be different punctuation and I'm just not getting it?
Let me double.
So it's item 2.
Works the shift trade. So yeah, with shift trades, it's really ultimately a behind the scenes literal trading of hours worked between two employees. It's a guideline that FLSA says is okay for firefighters. And so to allow for those shift trades, they behind the scenes trade their hours, but on timesheets, it's recorded as though that original employee still works those hours. And so he or she would still record any overtime as though they worked, even though they didn't.
So are they getting paid overtime though, even though they traded their shift?
They would, yes.
They're not getting overtime for those hours during the shift trade. It's
Right.
if they had a callback or within that FLSA pay period, they were held over, they had to work extra hours. Those hours that they're recording as a part of the shift trade would be counted in towards hours that could apply to determining that you've triggered overtime.
Right.
Because the shift trade in and of itself has to happen within a certain time frame within that 24-day. Am I getting that right? So that then technically it would fall into overtime because they're just trading a shift? Because to me, it felt like, well, if you didn't work the hours, but then that counts towards overtime.
It's not those hours that are counting towards the
Okay.
overtime necessarily. It's
Okay.
essentially those hours that you have traded. They're counted like hours work.
Okay.
So if then within that pay period time, for whatever reason, you now are working additional hours.
So it's
those
within that
hours
pay
count
period. Then
towards
that makes sense to me. Okay.
Determining,
Okay, that was
determining-
not clear that it had to be within that pay period, which means it would account to the same thing, that the shift trade has to be within the pay period. Okay. All right, that was just not very clear. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
I would note, Councilwoman, since you brought up the issue of battalion chiefs, as discussed, as part of the management decision made by the three agencies, we have eliminated the battalion chief positions and are going back to a structure of a fire chief and a deputy fire chief. And I would just add, just by way of update, our current interim fire chief is retiring at the end of this summer. So we have a posted fire chief position right now. We've had a number of great candidates for that position. In fact, we had listed preferred qualifications for a fire chief, and our cutoff was preferred candidates. So anyone who didn't meet our preferred criteria, we weren't even considering moving forward for an interview. And even with those that did, we're still cutting the numbers down and getting down to a group of 5 that will move forward with an interview. Once we have a new chief hired and after our current interim chief retires, then we'll be posting for a deputy fire chief to allow that fire chief to hire whoever his or her deputy is. So that's where we are on that front. And so we don't currently have battalion chiefs. And while that was included, that again, that it's not ruled out ever as a possibility in the future under our current structure. And as we will be presenting in the budget to council next year, it's a fire chief and a deputy fire chief. And that's been the plan from all 3 agencies. That's how all 3 agencies' budgets are prepared.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I will now again entertain a motion to approve the resolution unless there were other questions from council. Okay, sorry. Adopting the 2021 to 2024 collective bargaining agreement between the City of Sandpoint, Westside Fire District, Sagal Fire District, and the International Association of Firefighters Local 2319. This will be a roll call vote.
May I have a motion?
Motion. So,
Oh, sorry.
So moved.
second.
This will be a roll call vote now.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule,
Yes.
Councilman Espero,
Yes.
Councilman Groot.
Yes.
Okay, the final item on the agenda this evening is a resolution awarding the contract for City Hall customer service remodel and HVAC improvements. City Administrator Jennifer Stapleton will provide a presentation.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rule. It's our last item tonight, and I have to say, we are really excited about this from a staff side. This is another one of these items. This is an agenda of things that have been a long time coming. We were talking about as we were publishing agenda last week. This is, and Melissa, you can flip over to me. This is, we are requesting approval by City Council for award of a contract for a customer service remodel of the first floor of City Hall, as well as some structural improvements that need to be made for structural integrity of our building and replacement of our HVAC system, which will benefit actually all of our work areas and both buildings here. What people may not realize is actually our City Hall is 2 separate buildings that abut one another. So we are currently in our south building, and our north building is the building we're proposing the first floor remodel on. And so what will be accomplished through this remodel is we will have one-stop customer service area on the first floor instead of sending the public as we have in the past up and down the stairs and around the corner to police, around another corner to fire. All of our frontline services will be here at the front reception area at City Hall. We will be moving all of our building and planning services down to the first floor because that is our group that is constantly interfacing with the public. Probably that group in utility billing more than any of them. Parks, certainly we get a fair amount as well, but they'll be represented too at the front desk. We will have 2 conference room meeting areas here to be able to accommodate public meetings on the first floor. And in addition to the customer service benefit of this, this is a financial benefit to the city as well, in that when we bring our whole front lines together and we're cross-training across our front lines, instead of working in silos and looking at how much staffing do we need to answer calls or to help people in this area, and then are redundant in another area, we all experience kind of ebbs and flows of customer service needs. And so the concept with this is we will cross-train our front lines and be able to provide all of that customer service in one area. In addition to that, one thing I would note about this remodel is when the city originally purchased this building back in the 80s, it was really, there were very minimal remodels to make this a city hall. There was a little bit of painting and people housed kind of here and there and in nooks and crannies and in corners. And our staff is really excited about this. It's been a long time coming. They've watched the evolution here of council chambers. This is our first night in here tonight, and really moving to an atmosphere that is professional, feels professional, is not institutional colors and a pure white and a gray. And that creates a more pleasant working environment for staff. And so while there is the public police, it's important that we create a good environment for our staff as well. So this does accomplish that also. The HVAC remodel or HVAC replacement, that will be a replacement of all of our HVAC units. They're all rooftop units on the building. We had an assessment done of our rooftop units last fall as part of COVID recommendations about airflow and filtering air and air quality. And they did their assessment and said, not only did we not meet any of those recommendations, we couldn't be retrofitted to meet those recommendations. And furthermore, all of our units were at end of useful life. So we accomplished a number of things with replacement of those. We do have our rescue plan grant funding that's been passed through from the feds to the state to us that will support those kinds of projects in our city hall. In addition, we're working with the engineering firm that assisted us with design to get contracted incentives from Avista for both the HVAC units as well as for improved lighting. So we will have energy savings actually through both projects. So that's what this is all about. Planning and what this would look like for the community accessing city services, because the community, we're fortunate that the community does come in and engages with staff on a daily basis. We have a lot of community members that like to come in person monthly and pay their utility bills. And so what this would look like to accomplish this remodel is we will be closing the first floor of our north building during the remodel to the public. We have already moved our building and planning services last month over to community hall. So we're serving the public for their building and planning over at community hall, but we'll retain the rest of our services here at City Hall. Most of our staff with moving building and planning out gave us room for staff to move upstairs to the second floor. We'll retain a few of our front desk staff members on the first floor. They're actually going to be out here in the alcove to council chambers so that there's services on the front floor, on the first floor. And if the people need assistance from staff upstairs, they'll be able to come down. We have a conference meeting area here, as well as we can use community hall as well to schedule meetings. So that will be the plan. The proposed timeline for this project is probably a start of July 1st. And we likely will see remodel continue through November of this year. So this is going to be some time. You will note that we had storage containers for furniture and things out in the parking lot. So we've moved out all of our employee parking, including our firefighter parking, that's just typically in our employee lot, in our parking lot there. We'll need to accommodate construction parking for demo and bringing things in, but we will continue to accommodate public parking in the parking lot. So all of our staff parking had to go out in order to be able to make that happen. So this has long been looked forward by staff. We've kind of been in a state of flux at City Hall actually for several years, particularly on the first floor, kind of waiting for us to get a final design and really land on something that's going to work to improve customer service. So we've been trying different things over the last few years and feel that this is the design that really will provide better customer service on the first level. And again, I would emphasize really a better working environment for our staff as well, with energy efficiency, which ultimately impacts our budget moving forward. So we look forward and hope for your approval on this tonight. This is another item that's been a long time coming.
Thank you, Jennifer. Does council have any questions?
Just a comment, I didn't read all the 527 pages. I think 250 is my limit, just so you know.
Blame Cheryl. Those are her bid packets. She worked really hard on this.
I
So
tried.
I just get the pretty picture.
Councilwoman McAllister, I concur with, it was a lot of reading. I didn't get through it all. Can't say I've read every single word. I did look forward to that picture at the end when I finally got there. Like, that's what I was looking for the whole time.
Yeah.
So nobody has any questions. I did have a comment, and hopefully, I did get some inquiries from the public having a little bit of trouble recently trying to get water hookups situated because they didn't know planning had moved and some different things like that. So I'm assuming we're posting this on the website. And do we have any signage for the actual building here that's going to kind of let people know who aren't so savvy with electronic types of?
Yes, we will be getting signage up here. We did post about planning and building on our Facebook, on our website. And I reached out with a press release too. So our local news media outlets caught that. And we'll announce that again in conjunction with this. So I wouldn't say we haven't had a lot of people come over here looking for planning and building. It's not going to be ideal situation, honestly, for staff, particularly our couple that are going to be here in the alcove on first floor. So I really appreciate our staff flexibility around that. That decision was made in order to keep customer service here, because we felt if we moved anything else over to community hall, a lot of times those are our elderly population and others who are used to coming in here every month. It's a little bit easier to communicate to our development and building community than our general utility payers, people looking to set up new accounts. So we will have that here at this building on the first floor.
Okay, and hopefully you'll rotate staff through frequently so they don't have to.
We are all on laptops these days. So
Okay.
one of them will be our clerk is going to be, and so Melissa's flexibility is something to be recognized. Definitely customer service was the priority for staff.
Mhm, okay. Okay, if there are no more questions from any council? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution awarding the contract for City Hall customer service remodel and HVAC improvements.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this will be a roll call vote.
Madam Councilwoman, I didn't know if you wanted to call for any public comment.
Oh,
on this
I'm
item.
sorry. I missed that. Is there anyone who would like to comment publicly online or in the chambers?
I am not seeing anybody online raising a hand, and I'm not aware of anyone in chambers.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, roll call vote then.
Councilman Grote,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule,
Yes.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilman Sproul.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes, and on to new business, which there is none. and we will adjourn this meeting at 6:34 PM.